There's quite a few people already 28 people in the audience, that's awesome. Okay, so should we just get stuck in?
Yeah, why not?
Cool.
Awesome. So, Adil, why don't you start with introducing yourself and tell us a bit about Mastered?
Sure, love to. Hey everyone, nice to meet you all. Well, kind of see your avatars at least. So I'm one of the founders of Mastered. We started it in 2015. Our sort of mission is to help creatives succeed in their careers. So we've always just been about creative professionals. For the longest time, we were focusing on disciplines like photography, fashion design, art direction, jewelry, things like that. Yeah, we've been in boot camps for 7 years now. We've had sort of 5,000 people go through our programs. 95 different countries, incredible community. Yeah, really grateful for the people that we've met. Over the last so actually during COVID, just a bit of sort of background, I suppose. We sort of had to rethink about like if we were creatives today, but my background's in the creative industry, and so is my sort of co-founder. We were like, what would we be learning? What jobs would we be sort of shooting for? And we just felt it would be in the immersive industries. We felt it would be in broadly now what's called the metaverse, but we were thinking about it. Well, we weren't thinking. It was before Facebook rebranded, but we thought the future sort of belongs to 3D artists, 3D modelers, programmers, XR developers. Visualizers, 3D visualizers. We like that's really interesting. As we sort of move from a 2D world to kind of a 3D being the next big computing platform. So that's really interesting for creatives. That's where we think the jobs will be in the future. That's where we think the salaries will be, and that's also where we think you can make the most difference as a creative. Getting involved in projects that have at ground level have massive reach. So yeah, I mean, since sort of the last 18 months, we've been purely focusing on 3D, and within that, really just focusing on in games, because that's where the majority of the jobs are today. And I'll talk a bit more about the sort of areas that we're focusing on. But yeah, and very broadly, we run these boot camps, and the purpose of these boot camps are to help people get jobs in the games industry.
Awesome, thanks so much.
The background, Adele. Yeah.
Pardon? Sorry.
It's just hopefully that kind of covers the main bit in terms of the background.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the bootcamp, what are the main kind of roles you look for? You touched on that briefly with sort of like 3D artists and stuff like that and programmers.
Yeah.
Right?
So look, I mean, we've been focusing. I mean, for us, it's interesting that when we started these boot camps about a year ago, actually now, we're looking at XR careers, we were looking at VFX careers, we were looking at sort of architectural visualization and games, and quite broad in games. As we've kind of gone on more and more, we've kind of narrowed that down. One, to the games industry, because we think that's the a really established industry. Real time has started to get a foothold in VFX, but obviously not as much as the traditional pipeline. And then within games, there's lots of jobs, obviously. And I mean, the good news is that the industry is growing. I think Yuki sort of said that there was sort of the industry grew by like 29% last year. But where we feel the jobs are largely programmer roles. I think our sort of research says in a company of like 100 people, 6 out of 10 will be working in a programmer role, 2 or 3 out of 10 will be working in an art role, and maybe 1 out of 10 will be working in a design role. And obviously you've got other sort of roles outside that, like production and testing and community and all the rest of it, marketing. But in terms of the kind of creator side of it, by and large, the biggest jobs are obviously for programmers. So now we really just focus on those programmer roles and those art roles. And one of the hardest things about this is actually there's a lot of young graduates, talented young graduates who've come out of uni with a game design degree, and they're some of the toughest people to support because we made a decision quite early on that there's not as many design jobs as there are people looking for them, and that wouldn't be. I think we would be setting people up to fail if we were, looking at sort of design as a big category. There are obviously design jobs, but for what we do and what in terms of like intensive boot camps, last mile training, we really focus on programmer and art roles.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying that. I think one of the most exciting things about these boot camps are the free places that you guys offer. If it's okay, can I ask like how the funding works and why are the boot camps free in the first place?
Yeah, it's one of the most exciting things for us as well. So I think when we started doing the boot camps last year, we had our own pay when hired scheme, which was there was no money up front. And it's kind of no win, no fee kind of thing. We would train people and invest in them, and when they got the job, then the fees would be due, which was great, I know, but not everybody got approved for that scheme, and there's still obviously a cost to it, especially if you've just finished university. So we just engaged with the government beginning of this year. They're running a skills bootcamp program. Essentially, it's just about developing talent for growth industries, and we were like, look, games is a growth industry. They need highly skilled talent, particularly technical talent. There's a big gap there. If we can train people for those technical skills, then they can get the jobs and they can earn higher salaries and pay taxes and all the good stuff that comes with that. And then also they would help their companies, and the companies will grow and win more business, and put the UK game sector even more on the map. And long story short, the government have approved us as one of the bootcamp providers. I think we're the only one that focuses on games. And a bit of background, I suppose. The goal of the boot camps, and hopefully your goal as well, and the funding, all of it is all working towards the same goal, which is jobs. So we have funding for 16 weeks worth of training, and then we actually personally offer on top of that unlimited support until you're hired. And that 16 weeks worth of training is there to essentially help somebody go that last mile into a job. So one of the not negatives, but one of the kind of key criteria of the funding, it's that it has to be people who have a realistic chance of getting into a job within 4 months, basically, or 4 to 6 months, because that's what the funding is there to do. It's to help people go that last mile. So people who've got, a degree behind them, or been learning, at home, for a number of months or years, but just need that last mile support to get into the job. So that's what the funding is there to do. It's 16 weeks worth of funding, training, and it is for people over 19. You can't be studying at the moment. So if you're at university right now, you can't do it. You can't be claiming for any other kind of government funds. Right now, it's for people based in England. And we do have other schemes for people who are outside of England, but you have to be a resident in England, and you have to be actively looking for a job. Apart from that, I mean, it's people can be working already or working part-time already. There's lots of flexibility around it, but yeah, ultimately it's there to help people take that last mile into a job.
Awesome, thanks so much. Okay, so we also have Dean here, who is an alumni from Mastered. It would be awesome to hear from you about your experience on the course, how you found it, and yeah, if you'd like to let us know.
Yeah, sure thing. Hi everyone. My name's Dean, and I joined Mastered, I think it was back in January this year. So yeah, my previous experience is I was a software developer for about 8 years. And yeah, I did a bit of programming on ATM machines. I then did some more full stack web development at a company called Secret Escapes for a few years. And then I was an online video platform programmer for Sky for 4 years. And yeah, essentially towards my stint at Sky, I kind of I realized that I was really losing my passion for programming. And yeah, I really missed the feeling of, being really excited to, learn new languages and just learn loads of stuff about programming, new principles about it and all of that. And I just realized one day I just completely lost my passion for it and I was basically just working for money. So yeah, I've been a gamer my whole life. So I thought, why don't I try to marry my skill set of being a software developer to my passion for gaming? But unfortunately, it became clear to me quite quickly that it wasn't just because I was a software developer didn't mean I could become a gameplay programmer very easily. Because I know Adil mentioned before that the large majority of roles are programmers, and it does seem like most people in the industry are programmers. It's still not very easy to get into. Um, when you apply to places, they usually expect some sort of portfolio or experience, and yeah, if you've never worked professionally before, then that's kind of the catch-22 situation. So yeah, that's basically when I started looking to see what I could do to get into the industry a bit faster, and yeah, found Mastered online, and yeah, picked it up and started there. It was awesome.
Awesome, thank you. What would you say was the biggest benefit of you doing the course, and also like what kind of modules did you do, and topics did you explore?
So I probably there were quite a few things that I found super useful in the bootcamp. So the first was just the fact that I got to speak to a kind of senior Unity developer. I think initially it was every week, and then as time went on, it was every 2 weeks. And yeah, just chatting with him and picking up the terminology and just learning all these small bits and bobs that I just wouldn't have known anyway. Um, that was super useful and definitely helped me in the interview. Yeah, and then there was also kind of how much emphasis that Master put on making sure that you had a good portfolio, and not just that you had a good portfolio, that it was also presentable. So that was something I kind of just enjoyed the programming side of things, and I didn't really like trying to, make sure my LinkedIn profile was up to date, and I had a nice website to show off my games and stuff. But yeah, it was quite nice to have Master kind of push me into that direction and do those things. Um, and then I'd say that the other thing that was also super useful was the whole networking side of things. So yeah, I never really realized how important networking was and even what networking was, because I'd always heard about it my whole life, but as a web developer and software developer, I never really found the need to do any networking. And if I wanted a job, I just basically just get spammed by recruiters and eventually get one. But yeah, I guess the thing I learned about networking is that it's not necessarily just about finding a job. It's just about chatting to people who are in a similar position to you and have a similar passion to you, and you're basically just making friends with people who you share interests with, which is what you do in life anyway. So just making a bit more of an effort to do that, and yeah, I found that super useful.
Thank you. On the other hand, what would you say was the most challenging thing about the course, and how did you kind of like overcome those challenges?
Yeah. Probably say the most challenging thing was just sending off CV and job applications and just kind of hearing nothing back. It's quite discouraging. But when you've got people who are in a similar situation around you and you're hearing from them all the time, and you're also constantly being told, hey, look, this is normal. all you have to do is just keep working on your portfolio and keep practicing on the interviews, and it'll eventually click. That was the kind of encouragement that basically allowed me to apply to jobs non-stop for a couple of months, even though I wasn't hearing back for so many of them. And yeah, eventually, I think my portfolio and interview skills hit a point where I just did start getting loads of responses and started getting lots of interviews and started passing them.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I do find that a lot of job searching is very, like, morale based a lot of the time, and you really do have to keep pushing to get
Yeah.
to that skill level where you will get recognised. What role did you end up in after the boot camp?
So I got two job offers, and they were both gameplay programmers working in Unity. One was for a very small indie studio, and the other was for a bigger one. So I'm currently working at the bigger indie studio called Marmalade Gaming, and they basically make digital board games for multiple platforms: Switch, PC, mobile, and yeah, they're doing games like Jumanji and Monopoly, Game of Life 2 stuff. So yeah, mainly just programming in C# and developing in Unity.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. If we can go back to Adel briefly, can you tell us a bit more about how many applicants you're looking, or like candidates, how many spaces there are on the course for candidates, and what you're looking specifically for in those candidates as well? Like what kind of soft skills, that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. So look, we've got funding for another sort of 20 to 30 candidates to start before probably early November, so in the next 4 weeks, and that's sort of nationally. And then as well as that, we actually have more funding in certain regions. So if you're lucky enough, let's say, to live in either Cambridge and Peterborough, it's got kind of combined authority. There's the kind of Liverpool Combined Regional Authority, which is more than just Merseyside, but goes into sort of Runcorn and beyond. There's a little cluster around in the sort of south and west of England, around sort of Bristol and Gloucestershire, and then another group of places in sort of Somerset and Dorset, and then hopefully something in the West Midlands in the next sort of 2 to 3 months as well. So the way the funding works is that there's a sort of national program and there's lots of regional programs as well. I think there's a few questions in here actually. I think there's something in here about the sort of the work visas. So if you've got the right to work in the UK, even if you're not like a UK citizen, then you have the right to you are eligible for this boot camp. If you have a post-study work visa as well, so that you would be eligible again. And you have to just to be resident in those areas. So those areas were Liverpool, Greater Region, and Cambridge, Peterborough, Bristol, Somerset, Dorset. You have to be basically resident there. And the other kind of basic eligibility stuff I spoke about. In terms of what we're looking for candidates, I think there's another question there about, is it more, we are looking for art roles as well as programmers. So it's not just programmers. I think the majority will be programming because that's where the majority of jobs are. So we have to, make sure that we deliver the outcomes, as part of these sort of skills boot camps, and jobs are basically the outcome, jobs and interviews. So that's why we focus quite heavily on programmers, because that's what industry are telling us they need. In terms of, but we are looking for, we are open to 3D artists for sure. And in terms of what we're looking for, in terms of art, it's normally, I think it's familiarity with some of the key industry packages, whether it's Maya, Max, Cinema 4D, Houdini, Substance Painter, Marvelous, Substance Designer. So it's obviously sort of proficiency with that. Again, you don't have to have the best portfolio because that's what we'll work to do. But I suppose what we're looking for is, somebody that we feel has an eye. And then we can obviously work with them. You don't have to have gone to university. You could be completely self-taught. There's no problem at all. We're really keen on people who, what we call the uncommon student, people who haven't gone through the normal, not normal, this kind of sort of standard sort of journey. We've got people who just don't get along with university or classroom-based learning, or it doesn't suit their, who are neurodivergent, who just not suited to that kind of form of learning. And so we're really open to people who've, you don't have to have a degree, basically. Yeah, I think you just have to show us that you've kind of got sort of the passion and the potential. And obviously we wouldn't expect you to be fully kind of, or the smooth edges. In terms of programmers, we're looking for a bunch of different things, but normally it's some foundational knowledge, either in C++ or C#, obviously. People with a computer science background, it helps massively, but again, you don't need to. People who've done, got some experience in game engines, so Unity or Unreal, maybe done the Unity Junior Programmer course. Again, I think the thing that what we're really looking for is people who've kind of, there's one thing doing online courses or doing, training at university, but it's something else to basically have made, games, prototypes, projects, game jams, to be doing those things on a regular basis. So we were always really interested in people who, if they weren't doing anything else, they'd be coding, making games, or creating a 3D model, or creating some 3D assets. I think that's always really important to us. It's those people who kind of really stand out.
Thank you. We have quite a lot of questions come through. But before we get to those, I'd like to ask quickly, if there are some people in the audience who don't really feel like they are at the right stage to join this bootcamp, or they're not in the programming side of things, do you have any overall tips for Chrissy, because how they can find jobs or boost their success in looking for work as well?
Yeah, loads. And so, it's hard to know where to start. I've got lots of great tips. I think, look, first thing I'd say is the industry's growing, and it's only going to grow more. I know that it's competitive, and I know when you're on the outside looking in, you're like, I'm never going to break in. But we're talking about an industry that is has grown recently and will only grow more. I don't know how much. It's really interesting. You should sort of follow this sort of industry news, like websites like Games Industry Biz are really useful. As a background, the big tech companies are all buying game studios and they're rolling them all up, and good for good or bad, but there's a lot of money flowing into games because people see it as the gateway to the metaverse, whatever that means. But first thing I'd say to people is be optimistic about your chances of getting a job in this industry, because there are jobs and there's going to be more jobs. In terms of specific tactics, look, it's really hard to it's sort of case by case, but some of the things that I really like, we talk quite a lot about the hidden job market. There's still a lot of jobs that you get because of through your network. So I think sort of Dean touched on it, and sometimes you sort of say the word networking, and a lot of people who play games are quite introverted, and it feels like, oh, that sounds like a chore, that sounds like something I don't want to do. But really, it's just about building friendships, and being part of communities. That's one of the most powerful ways to kind of to get ahead. And you can do that in loads of different ways. So one of my favorites is research obviously know the games, the games that you love, find the the developers behind it, look them up, see where they're based, find the nearest pub, go to the pub that's nearest to the studios on a Friday afternoon, and you'll probably meet half the company there, and they'll be there, and people are open, people can happy to kind of to chat and network. And that's how you start to kind of, make friends with people in the industry. It's really just about making yourself known and putting yourself out there and just getting to know people. We've had people who, again, research the companies that they want to work for, go onto LinkedIn, follow those companies on LinkedIn, look at the people that are, who work there. In the junior roles, it's not normally, I wouldn't reach out to very senior people. I would reach out to somebody who's in a junior role, who's maybe like 1 or 2 years in front of you, who's got the job that you could potentially get, and then reach out to them and just say, look, I want to get in and love to spend, can you give me 15 minutes of your time for a Zoom call or a coffee or something? And most people will do it because they're like you, they were in your shoes not so long ago, they probably remember the pain. And say hello and then talk to them and ask them about, what they did to get to where they are, and be on their radar, get invited to the events that they're going to, look at their portfolios, look at their ArtStation, look at their GitHub, go to the game jams that they're going to, go to the meetups that they're going to. Really, again, games industry is growing, but it's still a small community. I think it's about 30,000 people. Was the last sort of number I sort of saw in the games studios. So it's not so big that you can't quickly get to know a lot of people. And so it's easy to kind of sit there at home and make games and, by yourself or do online courses. But there's a lot to be said of just sort of putting yourself out there, being part of the industry, being of the industry, contributing to the industry, taking part in, sort of chats or panels like this, understanding what's going on in the industry, knowing, I think when people want to hire people, they want to know that you love the industry. And so, they want to see that you've done things like, we've interviewed people who've got themselves mentors. There's the limit break scheme as well. But we can get mentors on limit break. Just gone and sort of organised those things. And that just says a lot. You'll learn so much about like where you want to work and who you want to work with and what it's really like in that company. Worst case, you get to go to the pub, have a drink, meet a few people. So, yeah, I mean, a big one is definitely making friends, I would say.
And Adil, just to back up what you said there, remember for one of my interviews, I'd actually applied to this company and they never got back to me. And yeah, I found their Discord channel for one of their games that was in alpha. And yeah, I basically just like played their game over the weekend and left them a big chunk of feedback. And then they actually messaged me and I told them I'd applied. And yeah, I actually got a job offer through that way. So yeah, you can even just do networking on Discord, not even necessarily at the pub.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've had one of our guys who got a job. He had an interview, and then there was a few questions that they raised. He went home and he basically sort of wrote a blog post about it, or wrote a blog post about his work and how it sort of and some of the sort of technology decisions he was making, and then just shared it with them. I think people like to see that you've got something to say. So if you've got a point of view on how development should happen, or what kind of work people should be doing, what tools people should be using, or all of those things just kind of elevate you from somebody who's just a name and a qualification on the CV. Because the other thing I'd say, by the way, is that recruiters are lazy. So when you get rejected, that's what I would be thinking about. I know rejecting makes it easy to take it personal, but never take it personal, because hiring managers, recruiters, busy stroke lazy, they're looking for any reasons to filter people out, because they just don't have the time or the energy to kind of go through pieces of paper. So if you look at it from their point of view, it's hard, because everybody sounds pretty similar. So any way that you can make yourself stand out, any way that you basically more human. Another tip is, you can you can apply for jobs, and then I've given many people jobs like this, who then say, reach out to the hiring manager or a director or whoever it may be, and just say, hey, I've just applied for your job. I'm really excited, for you to review it and to get feedback. It just, they get it, they read it, everybody gets their email, and they might just remember you, and it's just a good example of being proactive, and it's a good example of, like, these are the things that this is somebody who's going to use their initiative, and you like that. People will never, people are much more open and prefer kind of human contact, and there's never a bad reason not to get in touch with people.
For sure, yeah. It definitely helps, like, bridge that gap of, like, being more human to the people that are hiring, and they actually get to, like, know who you are and stuff. For sure. Okay, so to move on to some of the questions we've been given, um, I was wondering if either of you could go into a bit more detail about the boot camp and some of the topics you cover. One thing you mentioned was, or the website mentions actually, is that it's a personalized program. How does this work for, like, the individuality of every candidate?
Yeah, I can take that, and then Dean, you can talk about some of the topics.
Mhm.
So, I mean, essentially, it's all one-to-one. So the way that the core experience is, you get matched with an Unreal or Unity instructor. The majority of them are authorized instructors. Somebody who's worked in this industry. I mean, we have obviously different people, but let's say you're more interested in VFX or art or programming or code or XR or whatever. You get matched with somebody who's been in the industry, and then you meet them on a one-to-one basis over the course of 16 weeks. So it's an hour a week is one kind of stream of work, and the way that works is, essentially, we start off with the outcome. So we sit down and talk about, like, what kind of job do you want. And down to, like, is it an indie studio? Is it mobile? Is it cross-platform? Is it gameplay? Is it AI? Is it physics programming? Then what we do is, essentially, we have a skills scorecard, which is based on a lot of job postings that we've kind of analysed, plus all the work that we do with industry. And essentially, that shows you what level you need to be at for a range of sort of different topics. And so, in art roles, everything from modelling, sculpting, rigging, animation, lighting, whatever it may be, particle effects. So everything gets given a score, and then we assess you where you are today, and then essentially all we do is fill in the gaps. So that's how we're doing it today. I think it's a bit different actually in your day, Dean, but we've got these skill scorecard, and that's the basis of your sort of personalised pathway. The goal is based on, each one has their own pathway based on a job outcome. Assess where you're at today, and then on a weekly basis, we're working towards getting your level up to where it needs to be in each one of those areas. I would say also it's much more mentoring than it is teaching. So again, this is why we focus on sort of last mile training. We think all the materials are out there. What most people need is the kind of the structure and the accountability and feedback and the critique and the direction and the kick up the bum if they need it. So it's much more like having a mentor than a teacher who will sit there. It's not classroom based learning, which isn't right for what we're doing. You should be at a certain level to be able just to go that last mile, but with a mentor. So that's the kind of core of the sort of technical training. Around that, however, there's sort of monthly creator challenges to help you build your projects and build your portfolio. There are also, there's a big focus on sort of what we call job search skills. So we have another job search skills scorecard, because only part of the battle, and maybe I'll let Dean talk a bit first, is your technical skills, but also how you how you go out finding a job is a skill in itself. And so we've got a whole load of different sort of workshops that sort of work towards making sure that you can get those jobs. But I mean, Dean, do you want to talk a bit about the sort of types of topics that you covered during the boot camp?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, but I was going to mention it as well. Is that it's not, the course isn't just lessons. You're not sat down for 5 hours a day and then have someone speak at you. Which I've gone to other software developer boot camps, which is similar to that, but it is much more like, okay, here's a senior Unity developer, have a chat with them, and they'll kind of try to probe you and ask you questions to find out what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. So for example, when I joined, I had pretty decent just programming fundamentals because I'd been doing it for a while, but I had very little experience in all the other non-programming bits. So one of the first things that my mentor recommended I do was to jump on a animation course just to learn about all the terminology and like understand how timelines work in Unity and how you hook up animations, and like the Meckerman system in Unity, and like kind of what a shader is, and yeah, just how Lighten works. That was one of the first things I did, and then after I did that, he recommended that I maybe go and have a look at an AI programming course. And actually, most of these courses were just on the Unity website, and they were completely free. But it was being told to do them by a senior Unity programmer, which was very useful. And then also being able to chat about the course afterwards and be like, "Oh, I didn't quite understand this bit of the course. Could you explain it?" And they kind of point me in the right direction. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I bet it was super helpful, like hearing from someone like has so much experience in the industry about like what is actually useful to know in a games role for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hardest thing, we think, is that there's so much learning and instructional content out there, that it's easy to get overwhelmed. It's easy to spend time doing the wrong things. I mean, it all starts with having a really good idea of your destination, basically. Because again, serious games is different to mobile games is different to AAA games, and so the more nuance that we can get in terms of like, this is the industry, this is the job. So what we also ask people to do as part of the assessment process is come to it with a job that they would like to get, essentially, and go, look, this is the job I'd like to apply for. And then that forms that sort of helps to kind of form the basis of where we want to kind of head. And we have to be, more and more sort of strict now, particularly with the fact that this is 4 months worth of funding. People have to have that clarity. So unfortunately, some people we've talked to recently, they do a bit of design, a bit of art, done some games producing, a little bit of coding, a little bit of hacking around, and it's very hard to help those people, because I think you have to have that sort of clarity of like, it's this specific role in this type of company that I want to get, and then we can really sort of personalize things to that, and personalize the wealth of materials that are already out there. And just to say, because there's some really great questions, but just to say, I think we also just spend a lot of so we also put a lot of emphasis on soft skills, and you should, whether you're part of the bootcamp or go forward and applying for jobs, you shouldn't underestimate how important soft skills are to kind of getting a job and being able to. It's hard to demonstrate, but certainly, obviously, if you're networking or during the application process or during the interview process, that ability to kind of communicate really clearly, like, this is who I am, this is my goal, this is what I do well, this is what I need to improve. People don't often get used to talking about their ideas, but talking about their ideas and their inspiration, like, that stuff really, really matters. Everybody just talks about, we spoke with a studio yesterday who are hiring 20 entry-level game programmers next year, across 3 studios in the UK. And they were just saying, like, look, it's 50% technical skills, 50% character and personality. And that's also obviously about sort of communication. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but we do try and work on that with people, and practicing, how with others, that all really helps as well. So I think that's an important part of it.
Cool, thank you. We have a few questions related to the funding and how that works. One person asks, can I do the bootcamp if I've already completed a government-funded bootcamp previously? Or I think there was a similar question as well with people who do get government funding.
So I think there's a question there about multiple sources. So as long as you're not currently receiving government funding for, this was an example of a sort of postgraduate, if you're like maybe sort of study abroad or something, I think it's okay. I need to double check the question about if you've done a bootcamp previously, because that comes from a different pot of money, basically. The sort of student loans, undergraduate, that comes from a different part, and I think if you use the skills bootcamp part, it might not be possible. But whoever, I think it was Gemma, you can DM me and then I can look into it. So I'm not sure about that one.
Thank you. Cool. We have one question about programming languages. So, would you say there are more jobs in Unity? Oh God, I can't read these.
Yeah.
It's Sharp.
C Sharp, or C++.
C Sharp, yeah.
Yeah, I've got that.
Or C++.
Oh mate, if I so you can talk to 2 different people, or you can talk to 5 different people, you'll get 5 different answers. We talk to. So I give you a kind of overall sense of it, and then basically try and dodge the question. So look, Unity is still widely used. It's in 60% of mobile games, maybe even more. It's in, I don't know, I think it was like 4-5 billion devices, using games that play, that are built on Unity. It's huge numbers, is the point. It's a little bit more mobile and indie, and Unreal is a little bit more higher production and AAA. But equally, I'm sure you know some of this, but the AAA studios often have their own game engine anyway. And so when it comes down to the sort of fundamental core languages, in the way you're sort of describing, my latest thinking is that there's people really need C++ stroke Unreal programmers, but the bar to entry tends to be a bit higher. It tends to be like more junior to mid and mid upwards, because it's a more fundamental language, and there's more sort of heavy lifting and it's slightly more complex. There is a huge need, and industry will always say, oh, a lot of our clients are switching to Unreal and we need to switch to Unreal, but they need to find people who are very proficient in it. So if you think about how it works, is that if you're work for hire game dev studio, you've got a client who wants to either switch into C++ or delivering in sort of Unreal, and they're paying you to be proficient in it and outsourcing it to you. So then they expect a high standard. And therefore the sort of requirements of the people, what team that are working on it, tends to be higher standard. So it's one of those. I think that Unreal's like more of a pain point, but it's also harder to get into as an entry level. C Sharp, there's a lot of jobs for Unity programmers, but there's also a lot more entry level Unity programmers. I think I got off a call yesterday with head of engineering, and he was like, there are jobs, it's just a little bit more, there's just more choice. So it's hard to kind of make a recommendation, because do you go where most of the jobs are, because there are lots of jobs for C# developers, or do you go for the harder harder yards where the demand is kind of increasing. The other benefit, obviously, of knowing C++, we have had people who, like, if they can learn C++, if they know it, even though we use C#, we still think more favourably on that candidate because they've worked at a kind of more fundamental level and understand more programming principles. So yeah, I think it's one of those, is you kind of roll the dice a bit with C++ because that's definitely where the demand is, but the bar will be higher. Dean, I don't know if you would add anything up to that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, if you ask lots of people, you'll probably get lots of different answers. I don't think there's a definite right answer to it. But from what I've seen is like the best way to look at it is, if you're more interested in working in kind of indie games and maybe like smaller teams, then you picking up C# and Unity is a good shout. But if you're more interested in working in AAA studios, which has its pros and cons, then learning C++ in Unreal is super useful because even though they use their own custom engine, they still, a lot of the time, they still will want that C++ experience, and Unreal will be a plus as well. So at least for me, that's how I decided between picking up C# and C++. But I definitely found when I was searching for jobs, there were tons of jobs in both of the languages. And actually, whenever I've gone to conferences, I've actually still seen quite a few indie studios also using Unreal and C++. So it's not like they only use Unity. So I don't think you can really go wrong either. So
Yeah, I think you have to think what's the shortest distance to your job, basically. And also, again, it's the direction that you want to go in, and the skills that it's definitely, I don't know, yeah. What suits you, what do you enjoy coding in as well is another sort of factor. But whenever we've done like an analysis of jobs out there, volume wise, it's pretty even, I would say.
Thank you. We have a question for Dean. What would you say the differences are between working as a web/software dev compared to games? This person says, I'm doing mainly front-end web dev now, but find it dry and I want to be more creative with my code, as my background is in music.
oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, sounds similar to the reason I switched into game development. I'd probably say just like the biggest difference for me has been the fact so much of development is just based on knowing the engine you're working in. So in my case, it was learning loads about Unity. I mean, when I was a web developer, I'd kind of just learn a framework, which, often you'd have to structure your code in a certain way, but it'd be relatively simple to pick up. Whereas here, you've got this huge engine with this massive user interface with loads of menus and options and all of that. And so you just have to learn that. And I mean, they're very learnable. There's tons of resources out there, but it does take a bit of time and is a bit harder to pick up. And then yeah, in terms of the coding, you said you're finding front end web dev a bit dry and you want to be more creative. Definitely, game development has been a lot more creative now. I'll often just be given a task and there'll be 1,000 ways to solve the task, and you can kind of do it in whatever way you see fit. I mean, and that is always the case with programming. There are always 100 ways to do something, but I feel like it's even more so in game development. And then yeah, obviously you just need to learn about all the game dev specific terms, like what's a prefab, what's a shader, what's culling, what's a mesh, what's raycasting, just all the stuff that doesn't exist in other bits of software development. Yeah, and actually, one of the interesting things I've picked up is that the engineering practices do seem to be a bit less mature. So like when I was in web development, everyone would write unit tests or have lots of automated tests, whereas in the game dev industry, it seems to be way less common. But I don't think that's because people are like less smart in the game dev industry. It's just that there's just so much other stuff you need to worry about. So you just don't have time to to do all the like, oh, let's make sure we've got everything 100% unit tested.
Thank you. So, I was wondering if you guys could tell us a bit more about the introductions to game employers that are included within the program.
Yeah, so look, I think anybody that does the program, so we, as part of the bootcamp, we sort of guarantee an interview. When we don't know, because obviously you have to be ready. We're not going to put people in front of employers if they're not ready. It doesn't serve anybody any good. We're actually working with Intergames on this. Intergames have a network of 20 plus studios that we're working with, and part of our sort of partnership on this is we're going to be working together to kind of facilitate those interviews. We do other kind of formats, so we try to get like hiring managers involved in a sort of soft way. So, well, that's going to be the plans. These new creator challenges that we'll be running. There'll be people just attending and kind of listening in and kind of giving feedback whilst you're on the bootcamp. We're developing a kind of speed dating format as well. Largely what we do right now, though, is we essentially have a spreadsheet for each employer. And then when we think people are kind of ready, it's like a collaborative spreadsheet, and we just share new candidates with them. And if they're interested, they interview them. It's pretty much that. What we don't do is just sort of fire across CVs and things like that. People. It's just a little bit more one-to-one. We don't share, we're not a recruitment company in the traditional sense. We're much more interested in like trying to match the right people to the right jobs. I think that's how it would work. But you would be the actual funding itself is just 16 weeks. But as mastered, we go further than that, and we'll commit to support you until you're hired. And so that does mean, as long as you're doing the work, obviously, common sense. If you're not doing the work and not progressing and not learning or not applying yourself, or it's not the industry for you or whatever it may be, then obviously it doesn't apply. But for everybody else, we'll just keep working together until you've bagged those interviews and then ultimately bag that job.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's sort of like equal, like you give as much as you want to receive,
Yeah, 100%. So you have to, yeah. It's hard yards, by the way. Everybody gets obviously excited that we can put a team around you, and it's, it's fully funded, all that good stuff. But it's still hard yards. Yeah, even if you've got if you've got a degree, we know lots of people have got first in games technology degrees and not getting jobs. The opportunities are there, but there's still a lot of work to do. And yeah, it certainly requires a lot of effort. We can only open the door. You have to walk through it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to do a few like quick fire kind of, hopefully quick fire questions. We had a question earlier that asked about the chance to work on a project with a huge code base during the training process. Is that something that is kind of like offered on the course?
I need to double check. I don't think that's how it works. A lot of people are working on their own projects rather than working on existing projects. That's right, isn't it, Dean?
Yeah. And I feel like when you're learning as well, making things from scratch so you like fully understand it and all of that is quite good. But when you get a job, you'll run into the whole big code base that takes months and months to understand. So
yeah.
Caleb asks, does it make sense to apply for this bootcamp if my end goal is more production role based than programming? I definitely need to get deep into pipelines and how the industry structures its projects. This bootcamp seems more focused on art and programming than I realised. What would you advise?
Yeah, no, it's art and programming roles. I think producer roles, they're not really, I'm not sure if they're suited to a bootcamp, to be honest. There's sort of things that you have to kind of maybe learn on the job. they're, producer ones are good ones where if you can take some relevant skills from another industry and then go make some friends with some people in the pub, then you can get into those roles. But no, this is definitely it's technical training.
Cool. Are there any companies who would sponsor a visa for non-European candidates? I think there are a few questions regarding like being eligible, like location.
Yeah, I can see. So yes, I mean companies do obviously sponsor sort of people on visas for non-European candidates. I think they have to be big enough because there's a lot of bureaucracy that goes with that. So they have to be big enough to do that. And normally you have to kind of get onto this sort of, I can't remember, framework and things like that. So some companies will do it, but it tends to be the bigger companies.
Yeah, that makes sense. The funding, sure. Can people already in the industry enroll in this bootcamp who are looking to like level up their skills?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think another so there's two ways. One is if you're looking to upskill and then take that to find another job in another company. Maybe, I don't know, somebody's working in front end and wants to do back end, or somebody that's working in as a tester and wants to work in, as a game dev. And so yes, you can do it both to train yourself and then essentially leave and go work somewhere else, or we actually have. I didn't want to muddy the waters, but if there are people here who work in companies, we have almost as many places to upskill people for employers to fund their employees to train. So if you work at a company, I think there's a company there. It says that somebody's a senior tech dev at Jagex. So yeah, if they want to upskill their teams, there's another program which allows something like 70 or 90% of that cost to be paid for, and employees to be upskilled. So I mean, you may want to just DM me and I can tell you more about that.
Thank you, that's awesome. There's a few quite small ones as well. Just a clarification on when the next cohort starts. I think you said November, if I remember correctly.
Well, next cohort starts October the 25th, and it's probably, if you want to get your applications in today or tomorrow, we're going to be offering places next Tuesday, and there isn't. So the admissions process, we'd look at your application. We would also look at your kind of online portfolio, projects, GitHub, whatever. We do an admissions call. We do an assessment task. We review that assessment task, and then we offer places. I think if you got your applications in today, there's an outside chance that maybe you could start in October. But certainly, the last cohort will start in November, and those places will be offered about mid-November. So it'd be good just to. Oh, actually, sorry, no, that's not exactly true. For places like Liverpool and Cambridge, there'll be a December cohort as well. So until the end of the year, if you're in any of the regions. I noticed this question from Shami about resident. So I think if you've got a base in that location, an address in that location, it doesn't matter if it's been less than. We've had somebody who's just moved in that week to Newcastle, and is eligible. So as long as you're living in that location, and hopefully play fair and intend to kind of stay and work there as well, then you'll be eligible.
Thank you. Are we okay to have one last question?
Yeah, sure.
And this can go to either of you. What are the kind of things that make an applicant stand out, and what would you say, maybe Dean as well? What factor do you think helped you be chosen to be part of the course? Like, what do you think was your standout factor?
I think the thing that helped me the most was just my portfolio. So the fact that I actually had some games, like they weren't amazing, they weren't like full on games that were published or anything, but just that I had some games that actually showcase my skills and I could actually talk about something concrete about like certain software development challenges and stuff I had.
Yeah, I would just quickly say, I think I touched on it earlier. So you have to have some technical foundation or some foundation in DCC software, like whether it's Maya or Max or something. So you have to have some foundation. You have to have projects, and then what makes you stand out is just somebody that's clearly, sort of committed to this industry and of this industry and wants to be, can show evidence of them having, like Dean said, having made games or gone to game jams or, mentoring others or attending meetups, all of those things that just show that you're somebody who's kind of resourceful and proactive and kind of entrepreneurial and all of those sort of important qualities that you need in a job. Yeah, you'll need to kind of be able to think on your feet and things like that. So anything that sort of demonstrates that we're always looking for people who are personally sort of underrepresented, and that can be in lots of different ways. Learning styles, race, gender, demographics, income, just people who we really want to give people a chance who've, maybe not had a chance before. We have to work within the 4 months worth of funding, but I think it does help if people are, the kind of people who maybe have been sort of ignored or, unsupported or haven't fitted in the past in normal academic sort of environments. We're always really keen to try and help those people.
Thank you. That's amazing. You've both been so amazing at like answering all the questions and making sure everyone gets some sort of answer that's awesome. So I've just put in a reminder in the chat now, the link where you can sign up for the bootcamp, and also if you guys have any further questions that weren't quite answered or you just want some further clarification, the email to contact Mastered as well. But yeah, thank you both so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. If anybody wants to get in touch, you just DM me. It's fine. I mean, that's number one lesson, right? Make friends, reach out to people. No problem at all. Just say hello. It's all good.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. And yeah, again, feel free to DM me as well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I am going to pick up my daughter from school right now, so I'll answer you later. All right.
Thank you both so much.
All right, thank you.